The views expressed on the Jerry Cahill CF podcast are that of Jerry Cahill and guests, and not necessarily those of the Boomer Esiason Foundation. Nothing on the Jerry Cahill CF podcast should be considered medical advice. Such advice can only be given by a physician who is experienced with cystic fibrosis. The Boomer Esiason Foundation, Jerry Cahill and guests cannot be held responsible for any damage which may result from using the information on this podcast without the permission of your medical doctor. You're listening to the Jerry Cahill CF podcast presented by the Boomer Esiason Foundation and jerrycahill.com.
Welcome to Jerry Cahill's Living, Breathing, Succeeding podcast series. This show, being a CF mom with Beth Gerritsen, was made possible through an unrestricted educational grant from Genentech to the Boomer Esiason Foundation. Today you'll meet Beth Gerritsen, mom of two boys, Charlie with cystic fibrosis and his older brother Willie without cystic fibrosis. Beth keeps busy running around with both boys to sports events, school events, and keeping on top of Charlie's therapies.
My name is Beth Gerritsen. I have two boys. Willie is 12, Charlie is 11. Charlie has cystic fibrosis. I grew up in Connecticut. The boys grew up in the Virgin Islands, and we are now back living in Connecticut, right outside New York. I think, like any brothers, they are each other's best friends and each other's worst enemies. And they play together all the time, nonstop, and then they fight together all the time, nonstop. And 1 minute it can be one, and 1 minute it can be the next. But then there is a lot that we have to do, or can't do, or shouldn't do with Charlie with CF. And Willie ends up, a lot of times I'll ask him to help, or, help with medications or things. So they are there for each other. They're normal siblings. Growing up in the Virgin Islands with two boys was actually really nice because the weather is warm all year round, gorgeous. So on the weekends, you are out to the beaches, you're in the water, you can go sailing, you can go fishing, you can do whatever you want. I could kick them outside any day I wanted, at any moment I wanted. And we had a pool. Go in the pool or let's go to the beach. So it was nice to be able to just do anything outside. I ended up in the Virgin Islands because my sister, for some reason, decided that we needed to do something fun and different together while we still could, before we got husbands, before we got mortgages and all that stuff. So we moved down there and we bartended for Marriott. And then I said, let me stay a little bit longer. And I ended up living there for 17 years. Having a child with CF in the VI was a little bit challenging because the medical care is not the greatest, and there's not a large population, so there were no doctors really for him. So we had a pediatrician who was great, and I loved her, but there were no pulmonologists for him. There was nobody else to take care of him. So we saw our pediatrician, and then we would fly home every 3 to 4 months and see the CF doctor in the States. We have not been hospitalized since he was 9 months old. At 9 months old, he contracted babesia, and so he was completely healthy, normal. We had no idea, he was 9 months old. We had no idea anything was wrong, but he cultured positive for that. So we checked him in for 2 weeks, and then we followed up with oral antibiotics, but he's never been in because he's been sick or had an exacerbation or anything. So we've been very fortunate. It also sort of scared me into being incredibly diligent with his treatments. I think being diligent with the treatments and the medications, seeing the doctor regularly so that he could direct us in what we were doing and making sure we were on target, as well as the outdoor atmosphere, being in salt water every weekend, salt air as much as, I think all of that contributed to his health. Living in the VI and growing up and having them grow up in the VI, we've had amazing beach days, boat days, fishing, and then traveling with two kids, because I would always come up and fly up here with the two of them, and it was always me and the two of them. So if it was me, and then our first trip was when Charlie was 5 months old and Willie was 1 year and 5 months old. And because they're just exactly a year apart. So traveling with two little ones like that in the airports can be entertaining. If I had a chance to change anything, I would have directed a little more attention towards this sibling. I would have made a conscious effort to pay a little more attention to this sibling who can feel slighted because of all the natural attention and time that the CFR gets. If I could change anything, I would have been more conscious of that. All the hardest stuff in our life has probably been CF related, whether it was traveling home every time and whether it was the trips or whether it was, we've been having some weight challenges with him recently. I mean, quite frankly, if he was a normal child, we would not have weight issues. He's my husband. I was built like that when I was a kid, both my husband and I, but they want CF people to have a higher BMI. So we've been really working on his weight recently. And at some points it's been a little scary because Doc was like, listen, you put this weight on or we're gonna check you in and we're gonna feed you. Like, you need to put weight on. And that was, I think, the first time that I felt Willie was scared. Like, he was scared his brother was gonna go into the hospital. When we were leaving that day, he didn't know if he'd see him that night. And I was like, oh, he really does love him. So the best and worst times they're always together. We're always together. I remember when he was born, I was so worried about, I thought, if somebody touches him, he's gonna die. Like, he's gonna get sick and die. I was so worried. And I was just always so worried all the time. I didn't know what I was doing, which none of us do, I guess, when they're born. And I remember sitting in the office at his 6-month appointment. I remember sitting in there thinking, he is 6 months old. How did we even get here? I have been so panicked the whole time. I have not enjoyed, what even happened to the first 6 months. So I try and tell people to enjoy it, enjoy your baby. You have an amazing baby and enjoy it, because you'll figure it all out and you'll get into a routine and it will be okay. And don't miss this part.
We hope you enjoyed the CF podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell on the Boomer Esiason Foundation's YouTube channel so we can keep you up to date on our latest educational programs for the cystic fibrosis community.